This is Cheryl.
This is Emma.
This is Catherine.
And we're the Baronesses. This episode is coming to you from Yuggera country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and recognise their continuing connection to land, sea, culture and community. We pay respects to elders past and present. Trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised as this podcast may contain sensitive topics relating to pregnancy loss, grief and trauma.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're doing episode 6 today around childless women in TV and movies and how they're represented. How are you guys doing today?
Doing really well. Can't wait for this topic. This will be a good one.
Yeah, really excited for this topic, Cheryl.
Yeah, excellent. So just a heads up, everyone, there are going to be spoilers because we're going to be talking about movies and TV. So I'm sorry if I spoil anything for you. If you listen to any of them and you're like, oh, I haven't watched the ending of that yet, just skip ahead. I also wanted to just give you a heads up as well. There will be mention of suicide in part of this episode. So if that's something that's a bit hard for you, please do protect your heart and don't feel like you have to listen. So I just wanted to start off just by saying, like, this is probably going to be a little bit of a fun, casual episode. Going to keep it light. Not so research heavy as my last episode on regret. But I think it is important to talk about this because it is about, representation of our group and what that means. Does it actually matter? I think it does matter a great deal. Yeah, and just what representation there is and the ways that it can be improved. So what was your first memory of a childless character, Emma?
So I had to really rack my brains. At first I was thinking, I can't think of any. And then I wondered if maybe Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz was a childless character. Couldn't come up with many more than that. What about you, Catherine?
No, I can't actually think of any off the top of my head. We didn't watch a lot of TV growing up, but, I've got Minnie Mouse and Daisy Duck, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think that a couple of my earliest memories of like childless characters, not necessarily that they wanted children, but they just didn't have them. Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. Yeah. Also thinking, the evil queen in Snow White. Yep. And then a more positive one, I guess, is Mary Poppins.
She was lovely.
But I think it's interesting that, two of those characters, they're really evil, horrible. Yeah.
I thought of The Sound of Music.
Maria,
yes.
She was beautiful.
She was, yes. So, yeah, like two of them were evil characters. But then, yeah, Mary Poppins and even Maria, they are good characters. But I think that it's telling that it's because they're in relation to children, being in contact with children in a positive manner. Also, I kind of vividly remember... Do you guys remember Ally McBeal, the TV show?
I do.
I remember the ads for it and the dancing baby, about how that was like a reflection of her fear of her biological clock ticking.
Oh.
Yes, that would make sense.
She had like dreams of a dancing baby. And I think that was one of my first kind of like memories of like, oh yeah, women get anxious about this. And, and it's interesting. Anyway. Men don't have as much scrutiny on them as well. Like, I think that the Ally McBeal kind of example, it's like the men don't have that much scrutiny on their biological clock, so to speak. Because, men do suffer through infertility. They do have fertility problems. And yet there's not as much stigma or like pressure on them to have children at a young age.
That's true, and I'm even thinking of the older gentlemen. They're still eligible bachelors when they're well into their however old. It's not necessarily the same for women.
And we'll probably do another episode in future about male fertility and whether that's actually true. But yeah, the representation of men is very different. Like what comes to mind for me is just about like the childless man, but it was more so that he was reluctant to settle down.
Yeah.
And so like the story was always around like a woman finally came along and made him settle down. But it was never about like, oh, he better hurry up because the clock's ticking. You know, it was never like that. It was more so that he was like, oh yes, he's the cool bachelor and he's waiting to settle down kind of thing. I think that it's quite interesting because I did see a stat that men actually want to be fathers more than women, and women tend to be more uncertain about wanting to go into motherhood. Have you heard that?
I've not heard anything about that, no.
Yeah, there was like some sort of stat. I can't even remember who shared it, but it showed you how many people are uncertain and how many people are like definitely child free, or they do definitely want to have kids, they just haven't had them yet. And the majority of people are uncertain. They're not sure. But it was very telling because the majority of women, there was a lot more women who just didn't want to have kids or who were uncertain than there were men. A lot of men were certain that they did want to have kids eventually.
Do you know what? Just I'm like, I wonder if that's because the poor woman has to go through the whole growing the baby, birthing the baby, recovering from the birth. It's hard. Like, it's a lot for a woman to go through that.
Yeah, and I mean, we know that the labour that women go through, as in, you know, not child labour, but like, you know, just housework.
The unpaid labour.
The emotional labour.
Yes, the emotional. Like, we do a lot more of that statistically, even if we work full-time jobs.
Yeah, so maybe for a woman, there's a lot more to consider.
Yes.
Like, it's a far more impactful on her life.
Yes.
For a man,
Doesn't change.
doesn't change that much.
No. So it's very interesting. Anyway, as a kid, we probably don't understand the complexities behind these stories and don't notice the messaging we get, but then we do form, you know, core beliefs out of these.
It's true. This subconscious messaging that we're getting, from everything that we're watching and being exposed to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I thought very deeply into the Cruella de Vil character, but it does kind of make you think, like, that is the core beliefs that we're teaching kids, that people who don't have kids are evil and they're going to kill puppies or whatever, you know, like that they're selfish or they don't care about, you know, they don't have caring abilities or anything like that.
I think that's why I wanted to grow up and be a Disney princess.
Yeah.
She seemed to have a happier life.
That's it. But I guess that's the nature versus nurture debate as well, Cheryl.
Yeah. So I guess, what are some bad representations? Do you guys know of any bad representations in media of childless women?
Well, this week we had good old Taylor Swift.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That was not nice.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I don't remember who wrote the article, but there was a man that wrote an article about how she's not a good role model for young girls because she doesn't have children.
That's right.
And I think it's just pathetic that it's just horrible that he would say that. It's just, you don't know what she's going through. You absolutely do not know what she's going through.
Yeah, and it is horrible, but it's also in some ways not surprising.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a way that traditionally our society and patriarchy has like controlled women, is by shaming them.
Well, didn't they say something about Julia Gillard when she was the Prime Minister?
Yes.
I cannot recall, but...
Willfully barren or something horrible like that.
So even though she's this powerful, intelligent woman, somewhere it was focused that she was somehow lacking because she wasn't a mother.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how much success you have, you can still be seen as this negative thing. Yeah. So I actually thought about, have you guys seen The Handmaid's Tale?
Yes.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's actually quite a bad representation of childless women, I think.
It is. It's also very powerful on some levels because we really get to see the dark side of society when we do have childless women and people in power who want to force pronatalism.
Yeah. Yes, onto people who are fertile. Yeah. Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, Emma, so basically it's about a society where, like, say in the future, it's about a society where they just decided in America that, they're just going to make all the women stop working. The women who are fertile are assigned to a rich and powerful man, and he has a wife. If she's not able to have children, because in this alternate universe, the fertility rate has dropped, and they don't know why. So, as in, not people aren't having many babies, as in more people are infertile than fertile. And so they have these powerful men who have these powerful wives as well. They're rich and stuff, but they can't have babies. So they take the fertile women of the nation and they assign them to these rich, powerful men whose wives can't bear them children, and make the women bear children for them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they're assigned a posting for a certain amount of time, and once they've successfully procreated for that family, then they generally get a new post.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if I want to watch that.
Yeah, it's quite hard, but it's very, very interesting. And the women that are childless in this society are usually the rich, powerful, the wives of these powerful men, basically. And obviously, they're basically committing, trigger warning, guys, for rape.
Wow.
They're committing rape against these poor people.
So do these women live somewhere there in the house with these families?
Yes, and they bear the children, and basically they let them breastfeed the children, and then once the child is weaned, they move on. So, yeah, it's quite dark.
Do they get paid anything for them?
No, it's basically slavery. Yes. And then there's other women who also, like, they aren't in relationships with powerful men, but they're not fertile. So they're basically the servants. And in the show, some of these women are also quite mean to the handmaids, which are the women who are bearing the children. So they're portrayed quite negatively as well. But I mean, that's not to say I like really love that show. I really, really love it. But it does a bit of a disservice to the childless community in a way. Yeah. Even there's like one episode where, so the main character, June, she actually escapes this country called Gilead, which used to be America. And they go north to Canada, and where her husband is living. And she manages to get the child that she bore the husband that she was trying to bear children for. She managed to get the baby across the border into Canada, and she's at the park with the baby. And a stranger, a woman that obviously can't have children, tries to steal the baby. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of that. It's quite a dark series, but it is quite good because I think, especially at the moment with Roe v. Wade in America, it is quite topical. It's something that people are really worried about because they stop women from having abortions and things like that. You're not allowed to have contraceptives or anything like that. So yeah, that's quite a negative portrayal, I think, even though I love the show. Another example I've got is, have you guys ever seen the show Once Upon a Time?
No, I don't think.
No. Okay, so that one is sort of like a Snow White retelling. And in it, it's sort of like they have had the curse laying over the land. So no one remembers anything, but they're living as regular people in this town in modern day America. So the evil queen, she is the principal of a school in the town, and Snow White is one of the teachers. I can't remember what Prince Charming is, but basically they don't remember that they were in love or anything like that. And in the story, they have a baby, but she is removed and they don't remember her ever existing. And this baby is, what was her name? Emma. Her name's Emma.
Oh, yeah.
And she actually has a daughter out in the real world. No, sorry, she has a son out in the real world, but she is Snow White's daughter. Yeah, and the evil queen actually adopts the son of Emma, but she doesn't know that it's Emma's son. And basically she's just portrayed as a bad person. She is a bad person. She does a lot of bad things. But even her adopting the son, not knowing that it's Emma's son, is actually portrayed as a bad thing. Yeah, they really like lambast her for, taking the son away, but Emma gave up the baby willingly, for adoption, and she adopted the son and raised him as her own, and then...
So she was still crucified.
Yeah, which I think is really interesting. It kind of says a lot about how we view childless women in society as like, you can't do anything right. You're stealing someone's baby even if you adopt, and it's just
still being judged.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, adoption is like an easy process. We know that it's quite traumatic, and in a perfect world we would want the children to stay with their families, but we don't live in a perfect world, and people who adopt children aren't bad people.
And I was just thinking, I don't know that it was represented in the show that way, but I don't know that people, I wouldn't think that about anyone. You know what I mean? I think it's become more socially acceptable.
I've also watched a few shows or movies that had mixed representation, so I felt like it wasn't bad or good, but there was elements of both. Do you guys know of any yourselves that you can think of that might have been, a little bit mixed?
I feel like the representation of Pippa in Home and Away was certainly quite mixed.
Yeah.
If anyone recalls, the way that Home and Away started was when Pippa and, was it Tom? When they moved to town, they had a whole barrage of foster kids.
Yeah.
And I think they tried to adopt the ones that they could. But there was a lot of things that came up within the family because those kids were fostered or adopted, and the way that they were viewed by the town also impacted on the relationship within the family.
Right.
And I think, it's sort of people's view on adoption and fostering have sort of evolved quite a lot since then. But I think that was probably one of the more prominent portrayals of fostering and adoption in, a really public way.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. My example, like one of my examples would be Yennefer. Have you guys seen The Witcher on Netflix?
No.
Okay.
We need to watch more television.
Maybe I watch too much television. So basically, The Witcher is about, it's like a fantasy world, historical fantasy, I guess you would say. You've got the Witcher. He's kind of like a mythical character that he travels around and battles against, bad, evil witches or monsters and things like that. And in the show, there's Yennefer, who is a witch. But in order to become a witch, she had to give up her ability to have children.
Ooh.
Yeah, so she had to sacrifice that in order to get her power. Yeah, I don't think I can't remember if she just didn't do it, she didn't think it was going to happen, or if she did it willingly, not thinking of the consequences or how she would feel. But yeah, she just came to regret doing that, and she was very upset about not being able to have children. And in the course of the story, like, it was actually quite good representation up to a point. In, I think it was like second season, she actually tried to sacrifice one of the very crucial characters in the story in order to get her ability to have children back.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. And she almost did, but luckily was stopped and regretted the decision. And she did kind of make up for it. But I thought that it was quite sad that, they represented it that way, because she ends up becoming like a mother to this girl, like sort of like a surrogate mother, because she's a princess and she's quite powerful too, but her parents are dead, and the Witcher who she falls in love with, Yennefer falls in love with him. He's actually bound to look after this princess. So it's quite. I thought it was quite a negative portrayal, just because she almost kills this poor girl that's done nothing wrong to get her ability to have children back. The other example I have you guys ever seen Game of Thrones?
No.
It's funny.
All right. Well, Game of Thrones is also like a fantasy sort of world. It's very political, very royal families getting up in each other's business and not being happy with each other. And in the series, there's Daenerys Targaryen, or she's otherwise known as Khaleesi. You might have seen there was a lot of people naming their kids Khaleesi.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And also, I didn't realise, is it Arya or?
Yes, Arya.
There's a lot of kids with that name now.
Yes, she's in it as well. She's the sister of one of the main big characters, Jon Snow. But yeah, in this, she kind of loses her ability to have children after she asks a witch, whose village they had just destroyed, basically, to help her sick husband survive a wound. And but he actually ends up dying, and then the witch kind of basically tells her, she has a stillborn baby, and the witch basically says, you're never going to be able to have kids again. Yeah, so she loses her ability to have children, but she ends up basically saving lots of people who've been enslaved and like liberating them. So she becomes like one of the favorites of the show. So that was a very positive thing to come out of it. She has dragons and they become her babies. But by the end of the show, she actually kills an entire city of innocent people. Yeah. And she becomes like a bit of a villain. Yes.
Shame.
Yes. Which a lot of people were very upset about. I don't think you guys will have seen this, but I'll ask you anyway.
What gives you that idea, Cheryl?
Have you guys seen Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Yes, you've seen it?
Yes.
I watched an episode one time.
It's such a good show, honestly, guys. But the representation of Rebecca is a bit mixed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So she starts off as a bit of a villainous character because her ex-husband, he owned a football club and that he loved, right? But then he left her, and the entire time during their relationship, he basically said, I don't want to have children. And so she gets beyond her childbearing years, and so she can't have children anymore. And they get a divorce, and she grabs his football club as part of the divorce as a revenge, like a form of revenge. She wants to basically destroy the football club, and she hires a American football coach to come over and be the coach for this soccer team, basically. But it ends up actually being a big success. So yeah, she can't have kids. She ends up being a very heartwarming character, like very empathetic character. We all love her.
Yeah, that's when you said mixed, I'm like, but I loved her.
Yes,
but then when you jogged my memory, yeah, I remember.
And she's actually told by a psychic that she will have a baby, but then, I'm sorry. But then she doesn't have a baby, but she meets a man who has a daughter. And I'm like, it's not necessarily a bad representation, but it does feel a bit like, whenever you see a childless character, they have to end up with a kid in some way.
Yep.
So it feels a little bit like, we get like, she didn't end up with a baby. She didn't end up with the bingo, but she still ends up with a child in the end. And I felt like, that's not the best representation.
That's what, if I can tell you, I've been watching Virgin River.
Yeah.
And we're waiting for the next season. And that's where it's at right now, is the main character she's had pregnancy losses, she's had these fertility issues,
Yeah.
and I'm waiting with bated breath. What are they gonna say?
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm like, oh, come on,
Yeah.
writers. You know, let's have someone with a different outcome, a different story, but it won't be long and we'll find out
Yes.
which direction they're going to take her.
That actually brings me to my next example, which is Brandy from Bluey. You know,
I knew you were going to say Bluey. I knew.
Yeah.
Heard about it, yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily watch Bluey, but
Come on, time to come out of the closet.
It is a cute show. There are adults that watch it who have kids and who don't have kids. And one of the characters, they did an episode. It was very heartwarming, where there was a character that I think it was like Bluey's aunt or something, called Brandy, who was struggling to fall pregnant. She couldn't have children, and they did an episode of like, oh, Bluey asking his mum, why do we never see her? And then basically she explains to him, oh, because she's going through a difficult time. You know, sometimes you want something so bad, but you can't have it. And it was very like sensitive, beautiful portrayal. But then I think it was like the season finale, they just show her pregnant.
Yes, they do.
And it was a big gut punch for a lot of people.
Yes, I think it was, yeah.
It's very tough. So I think that was a mixed portrayal. I think a lot of people were hoping that they were going to keep her as a childless character, because we know that like lots of people end up with a baby who go through infertility, and that is fair. Like we want to portray those stories as well, but there's so few of our stories. Like there's not many childless.
It's true. And you know, you can see watching television today, you can see now the representation of other minority groups in the storylines now.
Yeah.
When's this minority group going to start being represented?
Yeah.
You know, you've got, you know what I'm saying. There's gay characters, there's trans characters. Not that race matters, but there's different race representation.
Yeah. And representation matters.
It does.
It really does,
Yeah.
because then you can identify, you're seen,
Yes.
you're counted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it destigmatizes things. It really does. And another example of that actually is, have you watched the show Sanditon?
No.
So it's a Jane Austen. It's one of her books that she never finished. It's about a girl who lives in the country, and I think there's like a couple of gentry folk who kind of break down on the way through her town, and she helps them, and they kind of invite her to come to their seaside home for the summer. And she basically falls in love, and you know, all the Jane Austen things that you expect from a Jane Austen sort of show. But one of the characters, she ends up getting married in like I think season 2, but she's been struggling to conceive, like she's not conceiving, and she's trying all sorts of tinctures and things like that to try and help her. But in the whole way through, she's discovered that one of her, I think it was cousins or something, she was pregnant, but was out of wedlock, and it was a big scandal. And she has the baby, but she's like frustrated. She doesn't want to be a mother. And you just see Esther, this character, she's very upset and resentful of this girl, but she's still got a lot of empathy for her. So she's kind of a good character, but the problem is that she actually ends up with that baby, adopting that baby. So I sort of felt like, yes, it's a great representation for adoption.
Yeah.
But not for childlessness. Because, you know, not everyone ends up with the miracle baby in the end, whether that's through conception or adoption.
I'm actually partway through Sweet Magnolias.
Oh, yes.
I don't know what happens, but one of the characters in there, she is a bit older. Her friends have children. She doesn't. She's had pregnancy losses. That's where I'm up to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how that story ends?
No, I think I have seen it, but I haven't. Yeah, I've not. I don't really remember it very well. Yeah. Yeah. On to some good representation examples. Do you guys have any that you can think of?
I can't think any off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Me either.
Okay. Well, have you guys seen Bad Sisters?
Yes.
No.
Yes?
Oh, no.
No?
I think it's Bad Girls.
Oh, okay.
Good Girls.
Oh, yeah, Good Girls, yes. You know, so
no, haven't seen
Bad Sisters is on Apple TV. So if you've seen Ted Lasso, you can check it. It's really good.
Okay.
So one of the characters, her name's Eva. She's basically the matriarch of her family, but she has no children. Yeah, so the parents passed away. I don't really know how they passed away. I don't think they really go into it, but the parents passed away, so she's basically the eldest daughter. And there's 4 of them. Yes, 4 of them. And she's like the eldest daughter, so she's the matriarch. They go to her house to celebrate Christmas, do all the festive things. And she's a wonderful aunt. She, and they kind of do go into her story. So she went through infertility, didn't work out. The partner left, went off and had babies with someone else. And she actually runs into him in the show. And she doesn't have like the traditional happy ending where she adopts a baby. She doesn't even end up with a man, but she ends up with her sisters, which is
That's
such
so
a
cool.
wholesome
Yeah.
show. But side note, the show's actually about them murdering the brother-in-law, which is why they're bad sisters.
Oh.
So it's quite a good. I thought that was really good representation for us.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Another example, Kerry Bradshaw from Sex and the City. Because
Carrie?
I actually thought that she was child free, but then someone said that she actually would have wanted kids, but because she married a person that didn't want kids, she's childless.
Right. So, yeah, Carrie and Samantha.
Samantha's child free.
She's child free.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, they have a bit of more of a diverse range.
Yeah.
Of their characters. Yep.
Yeah. So I thought she was a good example because she doesn't end up, with a baby in another way, but she leads a really happy, full life.
She really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another example, have you guys seen the movie Up? It's a kids movie.
I
Yeah.
have.
Yes.
I think. Yep.
Yes, Ellie in Up, she's childless. Yeah. So there's a sequence at the start of the movie where they're sort of together. Carl and Ellie are together on the in the park on a picnic mat, and they look up and there's babies in the sky, and it's basically them saying, "Oh, we want to have babies." And then you see the sequence where they're making up the nursery and painting and doing all that, but then you see a sequence where she's in a doctor's office crying. So the presumption is that either she's had a pregnancy loss and been told that she can't have children naturally, or she just been told that she can't have kids. But they end up having a really full life together as a couple. And then the story ends with that she's passed away at an old age and then he's on his own. So it's actually a good representation of childless women, I think. But also childless men, like men, he gets a voice. Like you don't see the grief of childless men, but you see his grief.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think I need to rewatch that one now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that comes down to how are men's representations different? And we don't see too much of the childless grief of men. And I think that's quite sad because we know that they do grieve as well.
They do, yeah.
Yeah. And often it's not about men's biological clock or anything like that. It's about them, resisting marriage and children until like a good woman comes by and nabs them and tells them, no, you're settling down now, we're always shown men are reluctant rather than actually wanting it.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of the stories won't let them not have kids. So a lot of childless women, it's like in the story, they just won't let them not have children. They always get the miracle baby.
They do.
And I think that's quite frustrating sometimes for us because
That's not real life.
no, it's life for some people, definitely, but I feel like there needs to be more representation of the people it doesn't end up.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot of sad representation too. So like you don't often see the women going on to lead happy lives. It's mostly like, oh, they're sad, you know? Which is hard for us because I think that we do look for those stories where there is hope, you know?
Yeah, hope and happiness and
Yeah.
fulfillment and, a good life.
So one example I've thought of like with the sad representation is, have you seen the movie White Oleander?
No.
No. So the main character, the main character Allison, she is a foster child and she's been, sent from foster family to foster family to foster family. And she actually finds a really good foster mum in Claire. But Claire has a pretty not happy relationship with her partner and she seems quite mentally ill. I think in the story that they really wanted kids, but they just couldn't. So she's ended up fostering. And Allison's mother actually sort of pushes her to commit suicide, and she does, which is a bad representation.
Very bad, yeah.
But yeah, it's quite sad. But yes, I think that the fact that we do rely on these stereotype stories also kind of shows a lack of creativity. What do you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the time too, now that you've mentioned that one, I think Instant Family on Netflix,
Yes.
I think the couple in that could also be infertile and then they foster a child who's bounced between various foster homes.
Okay.
And I think in the end they may have adopted her, but it's always looking at infertility in a negative way and adoption and fostering being your plan B.
Yeah, and it's quite sad too because we know reality is that a lot of adoptions don't work out. A lot of fostering doesn't end with the child having a stable home. You know, in the real world, these things don't really happen as often as the movies and TV would make us think. Yeah. But I think that it's really important for writers and screenwriters to kind of try and be braver, be more creative, go for the unexpected and nuanced story.
Yeah, and I think it would be good for writers to be able to portray women as something more than just mothers and nurturers, that we can go beyond that and be seen as people.
Yes, because I don't think it's as much of a problem for men, like men portrayal at all. Like,
No.
So some of the tropes I've read about is basically women have to be like resolved with a miracle baby. They're bitter or jealous. They want to steal or do steal your baby or sometimes kill your baby. They're sad and depressed or they're scary. Or sometimes they do something incredible, but it has to be really incredible. It can't be like, regular man incredible. It has to be like, I'm a superwoman kind of incredible. They have to save the world, It's like, it's only if those things are applied do we ever see childless women. And I think
Wonder Woman have children?
No, that's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's quite sad. You also see in old fairy tales, there's a trope of the longed and wished for child being granted to the older parents.
Yep.
And it's all these miracle stories, and I think that kind of does a disservice to childless women because so many times when you tell people, I don't have kids, I wanted kids, but I don't have them, and they go, oh, but did you know, like, there's this miracle, like, this woman, she had a baby at 48, like...
I've even had someone say to me, they pulled something from the Bible.
Yeah.
But this woman in the Bible was, 500 years old. And I'm like, really? Come on.
Yeah, and I think it does it does a disservice to us because it's not reality. No. Yeah, are there any others that you guys can think of?
Actually, now that I think more about this, Cheryl, there is some representation for men out there. If we go back to the story of Pinocchio,
Oh.
if you recall, Giuseppe.
Giuseppe, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Giuseppe didn't have any children of his own, and
So he made
the puppet, and then brought the puppet to life.
That's true.
Yes, that's true. I didn't even think of that. Isn't it sad that the men have more representation? Anyway, but yeah, I think also one that I've kind of noticed is a lot of stories around older childless women, but not many around younger childless women.
Yeah.
You
True.
know, because there are, so many. There's even one influencer that I follow. She basically had to have a hysterectomy recently, and she's quite young. She's in her 20s. And I think, it's quite sad that we don't see representation of people with her story. And there's women who are born without wombs.
True. Yep.
You don't see that. Like, you don't hear about those stories where it's, usually you see it's like, oh, it's the older woman who maybe is beyond her prime reproductive years, but she has the miracle baby. But you don't see too many younger women who aren't able to have kids. Yeah.
And when listening to you, I'm thinking, is that because it's just too sad? But then I think, no, hang on. Think about some of the other stuff on TV.
Yeah.
That's not exactly inspirational. And then I'm like, okay, so what are they trying to perpetuate by continually pushing out these same stories?
Yeah.
So
I think it's the biological clock, like, oh, don't wait, ladies, that kind of thing. It's almost like fear mongering.
and I guess whoever they are want people to have kids because it keeps society going, keeps the money pumping and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know, we could get into a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes, true. So what do you think would be good representation? What would a good representation mean?
I would say, so first of all, just to have the representation would be fantastic. But then perhaps to see someone going through the entire journey and out the other side, seeing childless women living empowered, fulfilling lives would be good representation. Seeing the other roles that they fulfill, see them excelling, telling all of those kind of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. What do you think?
Yeah,
Catherine?
no, I agree with that, Emma. So I think it would be good to see women being portrayed in a more positive light, given their experience with childlessness and infertility, rather than, being cast as the witch or whatever.
The sad lady.
Stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does matter because for adults, we have more ability to sort of think about those things more deeply, but children don't. Like, we don't see the complexities when we're a child. And if their first experience with, childlessness is an evil woman or a woman that ends up with a miracle baby, that's what they're going to think, about the world, even if they're not consciously aware of it. So I actually went onto the worldchildlessweek.net website, and they actually had some criteria for non-stigmatizing childless representation. So they said that in order for it to be non-stigmatizing representation, the women or men or whoever it may be, their life needs to be shown as not meaningless. They need to be not trying to acquire a child at all costs. So that means stealing the child or, whatever nefarious ways. And it needs to be someone who dedicates themselves to other activities rather than ruining other people's lives. Yeah. And I actually would add, that they don't necessarily have to have anything to do with children.
Yeah,
You know?
I think so. That's not the end goal.
No. Because I think so often people think that, oh, you're childless, you wanted children, that means you want to work with children. And I think that's a false dichotomy, really.
It is,
True.
yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because people who want children want to grow a family. They don't want to necessarily work with children and become, for example, childcare providers or teachers or whatever it may be. They wanted to grow a family.
Yes. Yeah, for a whole set of different reasons.
Yeah. All right. I think that's all I have for you guys.
Cool. Well, thank you. That's very interesting. Makes
Yeah.
me feel like writing some letters to some writers and
Yeah.
some of my favourite shows. And
Makes me feel like I need to watch more TV, Cheryl.
Makes me feel guilty about the amount that I watch. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear what the listeners think as well, if they have any examples. And I would really love it if, that we did see more positive representation.
yeah,
Yeah,
me
absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
It's a huge space, isn't it?
Yes.
Just begging for someone to come along and...
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for listening. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram, The Baronesses Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or comments or would like to be a guest in our show, drop us an email, baronessespod@gmail.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.